3 days later, Karen's appeal was rejected. The surveyor's measurements were accurate, verified by GPS coordinates, and confirmed by a second independent assessment she'd demanded at her own expense. Her perfect stone border would have to move. "This is war," she announced to her reflection while applying her morning lipstick. The woman staring back looked tired, dark circles under her eyes from staying up late researching property law, her usually perfect hair showing signs of stress-induced neglect. Instead of moving the border, Karen decided on a different strategy. She would make Marcus's life so miserable that he'd voluntarily relocate his sculpture just for peace. She started small, filing noise complaints about his morning lawn mowing. 7:03 am violated the 7:30 am noise ordinance, reporting his mailbox for being 0.3 inches too close to the sidewalk, and documenting every blade of grass that dared grow above the prescribed 2.5-inch height limit. Marcus responded by adjusting his contraction. The motion sensors became more sensitive. The springs tightened. Karen noticed him adding what appeared to be paint canisters to the mechanism's base. "Linda, come look at this," Karen called from her kitchen window. Her sister joined her, squinting across the street. "Is that thing bigger than before?" "Much bigger. And he's added speakers." Karen pointed to small black boxes mounted on posts around the device. "I think he's planning to blast music or something equally obnoxious." That afternoon, Karen received her first taste of Marcus's upgraded system. While inspecting her relocated border stones, moved exactly 24 inches as required, measured with a professional surveyor's tape, she accidentally stepped on his property line. The contraction erupted. Water cannons she hadn't noticed shot streams in 3 directions. Air horns wailed like banshees. Bright strobe lights flashed in seizure-inducing patterns. And covering it all, speakers blared what sounded like a mariachi band having an argument with a death metal concert. Karen stumbled backward, soaked and temporarily deaf, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Neighbors emerged from houses up and down Maple Ridge Drive, phones already recording. "Wait till hell is that thing," shouted Mrs. Patterson from across the street. Marcus appeared in his doorway, wearing noise-canceling headphones and a shit-eating grin. He held up a remote control, and the chaos ceased instantly. "Motion-activated art installation," he called out cheerfully. "Responds to unauthorized trespassers." "That's not art, it's a booby trap." Karen sputtered, wringing water from her blouse. "Nope, checked with the county. As long as it's on my property and doesn't cause permanent injury, it's perfectly legal. Call it performance art." Karen's phone buzzed. Text messages were already flooding in from neighbors, some expressing concern, others sharing videos with crying, laughing emojis. She watched her carefully cultivated reputation as a reasonable HOA president crumble in real time. That night, she called an emergency HOA board meeting. "This has gone too far," she announced to the 5 other board members gathered in her living room. "Marcus Henderson is operating a dangerous device designed to harass neighbors." "Did anyone get hurt?" asked Dave Kowalski, the treasurer. "That's not the point." "Were any laws broken?" interrupted Susan Chen, the secretary. Karen's jaw clenched. "Technically, no. But then our hands are tied," Dave said. "HOA covenants can't supersede county law. If the installation is legal, we can't force him to remove it." "What about community standards? Quality of life? Property values?" Susan leaned forward. "Karen, I have to ask, what exactly did you do to provoke this? Marcus has lived here for 8 years without any issues." The room fell silent. Karen felt 6 pairs of eyes studying her, and for the first time in years, she was the one being judged instead of doing the judging. "I enforced community regulations," she said stiffly. "That's my job." After the board members left, Karen sat alone in her kitchen, staring at her laptop screen. She'd pulled up the real estate listings for other neighborhoods, but couldn't bring herself to seriously consider moving. Willowbrook was her domain, her carefully ordered kingdom where every mailbox aligned and every lawn maintained regulation height. She wouldn't be driven out by some redneck with a hardware store fetish. Marcus's warning echoed in her mind. Hair trigger, responds to vibrations, especially from vehicles. A plan began forming. If he wanted to play games, she'd show him what a real strategist could accomplish. Checked with a lawyer friend. Turns out there's a whole process for dealing with neighbors who abuse the complaint system. Marcus grinned. Funny how that works. That evening, Karen sat in her pristine living room, staring at the cease and desist order. Her phone had been buzzing all day with calls from neighbors, some expressing sympathy, others openly laughing at videos of her getting soaked by Marcus's contraption. Linda arrived with takeout Thai food and found her sister surrounded by legal documents and empty wine bottles. Maybe it's time to wave the white flag, Linda suggested gently. I can't, Karen said. If I back down now, I'll never have authority again. The Henderson situation has made me look weak, reactive. 3 board members have already suggested maybe it's time for new leadership. Would that be so terrible? Karen looked at her sister with genuine surprise. This neighborhood was chaos before I took over. Lawns like jungle scenes, holiday decorations left up year-round, garbage cans permanently visible from the street. I brought order, standards. Property values have increased 23% since I became president. At what cost? Linda asked quietly. Before Karen could answer, a tremendous crash echoed from outside. Both women rushed to the window to see Marcus's contraption had somehow activated, shooting colored powder and water in all directions. Marcus himself stood in his driveway, holding his remote control and looking confused. What the hell? He muttered, pressing buttons frantically. The device continued its chaotic display for another 30 seconds before finally shutting down. Marcus approached it cautiously, examining the mechanism with growing concern. Karen watched him discover what appeared to be a timing device attached to the motion sensors, something that definitely hadn't been there before. As Marcus held up the small electronic component, his eyes met Karen's through her kitchen window. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that made Karen step back from the glass. She hadn't installed that timer. She hadn't even known such devices existed. But someone had been busy while Marcus was at work. And that someone had just escalated their neighborhood war into uncharted territory. Marcus pocketed the timer and pulled out his phone, his fingers moving rapidly across the screen. Karen's own phone buzzed moments later with a text from an unknown number. Game on, neighbor. But you might want to check your own property for surprises. Karen's blood ran cold as she realized she might have underestimated her opponent. This wasn't just about property lines or HOA regulations anymore. This was personal, and Marcus Henderson was apparently much more creative than she'd given him credit for. As she watched him install what looked like security cameras around his contraption, Karen began to wonder if she'd started a war she couldn't win. The sound of Karen Whitmore's perfectly manicured fingernails drumming against her steering wheel echoed through the Lexus as she watched her neighbor Marcus install what appeared to be a medieval torture device disguised as lawn art. The metallic contraption gleamed menacingly in his driveway, complete with springs, spikes, and what looked suspiciously like a motion sensor. Absolutely not, she muttered, yanking her phone from her designer purse. Speed dial number 3. Willowbrook HOA emergency line. This is Karen Whitmore, 47 Maple Ridge Drive. I'm reporting a clear violation of Section 12.47 regarding unauthorized mechanical installations. Her voice carried the authoritative tone of someone who'd memorized the HOA handbook twice and quoted it at neighborhood barbecues. 20 minutes later, she marched across the street in her power-walking sneakers, clipboard in hand. Marcus was adjusting what appeared to be a pressure plate beneath an innocent-looking decorative stone. "Excuse me," Karen called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That contraption violates at least 14 different HOA regulations." Marcus looked up, grease smudged on his weathered hands. "Morning, Karen. This here's art. Modern sculpture, you might say. Art doesn't have motion sensors and what appears to be a pneumatic system." She gestured wildly at the device. "And it certainly doesn't belong 3 feet from the property line, where it could endanger pedestrians." "Funny thing about property lines," Marcus said, standing slowly. "Checked with the county surveyor last week. Turns out this here's been my land all along." Previous owner had the fence installed wrong. Karen's eye twitched. She'd been fighting the Hendersons next door about that exact fence for 2 years. That's impossible. I have documentation. County says otherwise. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his back pocket. Surveyor's report. Dated yesterday. The paper fluttered in Karen's trembling hands as she read. Her pristine front lawn, the one she'd spent 3 years cultivating to HOA perfection, was apparently 2 feet smaller than she'd believed. Worse, the decorative stone border she'd installed last spring was technically on Marcus's property. This can't be legal, she whispered. Legal as Sunday church, Marcus grinned. Speaking of which, you might want to move that fancy border of yours. I'll leave you till tomorrow evening, being neighborly and all. Karen's face cycled through several shades of red. You can't just. This is harassment. I'm calling the police. For what? Installing art on my own property. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. Though I should warn you, this particular sculpture's got a hair trigger, responds to vibrations, especially from vehicles. Wouldn't want anyone getting startled by it. Are you threatening me? Just being neighborly, Marcus said, disappearing into his garage. That evening, Karen sat in her kitchen, surrounded by HOA bylaws, county documents, and printouts from the property appraiser's website. Her sister Linda arrived with wine and sympathy, finding Karen furiously highlighting passages in the community handbook. He's trying to intimidate me, Karen explained, pouring herself a generous glass of Chardonnay. But I've been HOA president for 3 years. I know every loophole, every regulation, every possible angle. What if you just move the border? Linda suggested. 2 feet isn't worth a war. Karen's laugh was bitter. It's not about the border, Linda. It's about precedent. If I back down now, every rule breaker in Willowbrook will think they can walk all over community standards. She pulled up the county website on her laptop. I'm filing an appeal on the surveyor's report. There has to be an error. What Karen didn't know was that Marcus had been planning this moment for months, ever since she'd reported him for having his garbage cans visible from the street for 37 minutes past pickup time. His art installation was perfectly legal, meticulously designed, and absolutely guaranteed to teach his uptight neighbor a lesson she'd never forget. The trap was set. Now all he had to do was wait.